Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today. And if you've been following the podcast, boy, have we been in a mood this year for coming back to ourselves. And I think this is a beautiful topic of conversation that we need to continue as well, especially with all the things going on in the world, the things that are out on social media. There are so many things that take us outside of who we are. And I feel like one of the best people to have this conversation with today to even dive deeper and really be able to give you guys some tools, some tips, some tricks. I am so excited. So Dr. Margaret Cochran, thank you so much for joining me for the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited for this one. We had so much fun on our last conversation, and I was like, oh, I want to pick your brain so much, and I was like, don't do it, don't do it. We got to save it for the podcast. So Dr. Margaret, please do me a favor. Tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Well, I have a background in medical psychology, social work, also special education. So I work with neurodivergent populations. I do coaching now worldwide, and I'm known as a relationship doctor on social media.
I love this. And I love that, when we talked about this in the beginning, I was like, when we talk about relationship and you're like, oh, that can be a relationship with your people, that can be the
Oh yeah.
relationship with yourself, that can be the
Oh yeah.
relationship with, your kids, your family, XYZ. And I love that because I don't think that a lot of us, when we think of relationship, I think we immediately go to like, oh, okay, so whomever we're with, right? Our spouse, our partner, whatever that is. But you have a relationship with every single person that you run into, whether it's someone you know, you don't know, your kids, your family, anyone that is in your sphere, right? You
Yeah.
have a relationship with them. And how are you maintaining that relationship, or what are you doing with that relationship? Is that relationship worth you being in? And that comes down to, I feel like on a personal level, right? Does me being around my family benefit me, or is it taking me down? And I know that's a really hard thing for a lot of people because we are taught, right, that you're supposed to love your family, you're supposed to always be there for them. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people that I know that weren't raised in great homes like that, and they still feel like they owe something to their family, and it's crushing them because of that. And so I kind of want to start there and just kind of get your insight and your feedback when we're talking about relationships and the importance of it and what it means to people. Yeah, I'll let you kind of take it away.
Okay. Well, there's a good broad
I
spectrum to start with.
know.
Okay, so here's the thing. When you grow up in a family, all families have problems of one kind or another. They can have small or big. And if you're kind of north of small, um, you basically get brainwashed. And you get these messages over and over again that you don't have a self. You don't have needs and feelings. You don't have a right to agency or personal freedom. And oh, by the way, you're responsible for my behavior and feelings.
Mm,
Okay. So as a result of that, it creates hypervigilance, it creates anxiety, it creates depression, and it creates Trauma, lots of trauma. Now, this is really important because if you grow up in what's called, if we look at small or big, down on this end, we have pretty much a love-based family. Things go wrong, but they care for each other, they talk through problems, etc., reconnect. On this end, we have a shame-based family. No resolution to problems, nothing is going to get better. It's kind of set in stone there. And there are five basic pillars that support a shame-based family. You
Ooh.
don't know what you know. You don't see what you see. You don't feel what you feel. To tell the truth is to betray. And my personal favorite, you can't have a need someone else might not like. So you take those five pillars out into the world and try and have relationships with other people, and you're in major doo-doo really fast. And it will basically damn you, if you will, to choosing partners that are just like that family that brainwashed you in the first place. And you'll be so puzzled because you said to yourself on a conscious level, in your prefrontal cortex, you thought, I'm not going to do that. That's not what my life is going to be like. And then you pick one, you pick two, you pick three, you pick four, and you think, what is going on here? Why do I keep doing this and falling into the same trap? And it's not your fault. It's not like you consciously choose to be wounded over and over again, but you are energetically, emotionally, and intellectually drawn to those feelings that you grew up with.
Mm. This is such a good one. And I think that I want people to hear what it is that you said, right? That it's not your fault. So when you recognize that you've been in a situation and you're like, I don't want to be in that situation anymore, but why do I keep being in it? Understanding this concept, which is, when we start to talk about the conscious and the subconscious and understanding what is really running in the background, which really is running your decision making. And what's really interesting is I never understood that. I thought, okay, well, if I make the decision, if I'm the one that says this is what I want to do, then I'm doing it. But I keep putting myself in the situation, so obviously I'm just failing. I just suck at being able to change. So I thank you for bringing this
Mm,
up about the importance of understanding that it's not your fault. It's
mm.
literally the way that your brain has been wired. And I'd love for you to kind of give people an idea of like, how do I start changing that? If I notice it, if I've said like I'm not going to do this, I don't want to be in a family like this, I don't want to be around people like this, but you keep finding your way drawn to that, how do we break that cycle?
Well, there are a couple things. When you get into trauma, and again, if we come from a pretty pathological family, we kind of carry that with us unless we've done a lot of work to get rid of that. So we're carrying this around, and what happens is your limbic system, which is driven primarily by your amygdala, and there are two little almond-shaped guys back here. It is the most powerful force in your brain. Now, the human brain has not evolved a whole bunch in the last 10,000 years. So we've got 10,000-year-old technology, 21st century problems. What could possibly go wrong? Kind of, kind of everything. Look at the world. It's showing
Yeah.
what's going on. So what happens is that your limbic system, particularly your amygdala, they're set up for survival. We got to have that. Because if we got some large person-eating thing coming at us, we need to not digest, not think about sex, not wonder what's in the newspaper today. We need to run like heck, fire, and tarnation to try and get away from that thing, right? Problem is that when that happens, something called a limbic hijack takes place. And that means that neurologically, even down to your circulatory system, the limbic system is in control. And the prefrontal cortex, this executive functioning, thinking, reasoning part, offline. Okay, so you come from a traumatic family, you meet Mr. or Ms. Narcissist who does those familiar things like love bombing and gaslighting and all that exciting, really horrible, not good stuff. And you think, this is love. Okay, because your limbic system is telling you, yeah, you've got that feeling, you've got those chemicals. That's what you know. That's what's right. And your prefrontal cortex occasionally might get, like a little, I think this might be a red flag. Didn't we read about that? No, 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 this is love. Don't pay attention to red flags. Just go in there and get love because you had so little. You came from so little and you wanted so much. And by the way, it's perfectly normal to want to be loved and needed and cherished and valued. Those are good things. The problem is that the pathology and the normal needs have gotten woven together so that you'll conflate the two and you can't tell them apart anymore. So part of healing is beginning to develop what's called metacognition, which means you begin to look at what you're doing from a distance.
Mm,
So you found this perfect person and they're doing their things, and you back up a minute and say, huh, feels like I've been here before. What are these things that are happening? And then name them. What am I feeling? What am I seeing? And then the third question is, what would I tell somebody who came to me with this story?
mm.
And you know what? Y'all give great advice. You just don't listen.
Boy, isn't
So
that the truth?
So just listen to that voice, listen to that advice, and then take it. And here's the confounding factor, though. When you come from an unhealthy family, one of the things they promise you is if you don't play by the rules, those 5 rules I talked about earlier, you're out. You're alone, you have nothing, and no one will ever love you because if your family can't love you, no one will love you. So there's this secret implanted fear that if you let go of this pathological, awful mess, you'll have nothing. And because the fear is implanted as a child, we have no power or agency there. We literally, our lives depend on our parents and our family for food and shelter, basic stuff. And even though as adults we think, oh, well, I can pay my own bills, I can get a job, blah, blah, blah. There's that little kid in there, that frightened, terrified, wounded little kid who says, but we'll be alone. I don't want to be alone. I've been alone a long time. I want someone to love me. And if there's a discussion or a disagreement between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system, guess who wins? Limbic system, hands down. So that ability to do metacognition and pull back and ask those questions. Another little trick for that one is to think about yourself in the third person. So you pull back and you look at the situation and say, what's Kat learning from this right now? What's Kat seeing right now? And studies show just going to that third person metacognitive place reduces anxiety, slows your blood pressure, slows your heart down, and gives your prefrontal cortex a chance to engage.
Mm,
Now, here's one more little trick about that because it's super important to be able to get this back online. If someone's doing something to you, let's say somebody says, oh, really, you're going to wear that today? So there's a, right? So
yep.
you you think in your head, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then you say, would you repeat that, please? Now, if you ask someone to repeat it, in most cases, they're going to back down or go away or slink under the skirting board or something. But if they do repeat it, then you go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then you say, did you mean that to sound insulting and hurtful? You're back online, baby. You are on top of the situation. Now, what did those Mississippis do? It gave time for your prefrontal cortex to catch up with your limbic system so you can think and not just react.
Oh, I love this so much too, because I know, being on the other side, especially when I was in my abusive relationship, that I was the most reactive person you had ever met, right? And it's really interesting when we think about how we have conversations with people. And one, silence filling the space makes everybody uncomfortable, right? So you feel like you got to say something. And in that moment, you're not allowing yourself the space to be able to process and fill in the blanks. And I think that this is a beautiful testimony to giving ourselves grace, space, and time to process
Mm-hmm.
before feeling like that we need to answer something. One of the things that, I did when I got out of that relationship, when you talked about putting yourself in the third person, was when I would find myself in a similar feeling, not even necessarily a similar situation. My husband could say something that he was joking or we had been talking about, but I would have this feeling kind of come back that put me
Mm-hmm.
in a state that I knew I had been in before.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was able to recognize that, one of the first things that I started doing was, okay, I know it just came up in my brain in regards to what I believe, but I also trust this person and I don't think this is what they're saying. So what I would do is I would stop and I'd say, hey, babe, I just had a really funny thought. I want you to explain to me, if you don't mind, what you meant by that. Because what I heard was, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's what you said. And what it did was it created a space, kind of like you're saying, where my brain got to think the thought, which is the belief that had been put in it for 10 years that I was in that
Mm-hmm.
relationship. But then it got to hear something else. And I was like, oh, okay, I choose to believe that. And the more that I got to choose to listen to that and ask those questions, the easier it was to start letting go of that other belief. Now, is everything completely gone? Absolutely not. There's still things that still like twinge or get caught up. And I think that, a lot of that is just because it was so ingrained for such a long time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but it's to the point to where it is manageable. And I know my reality and what I choose versus the reality that was put on me that I was in for such a long time. And it's a really interesting space, I think, to be in. And I think that's why psychology and the way that our brain works fascinates me because I never understood that the brain is not here to help you grow. The brain is here to keep you safe because it needs to be able to survive. And when I first learned that, I thought, oh my gosh, think of how much information we take in on a regular basis
Yeah.
and we take it for truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's destroying what we actually believe. And so, I feel like this is something that we need to be having a conversation about, especially nowadays, of when you are bombarded with everything that's online and on the news and in the social medias and blah, 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 blah. When you are looking at that, even if you are in a good space in your life, every time that you fill yourself with that, you're still filling yourself with those emotions, right? That
Mm-hmm.
are
Yes.
connected to that. And then are you making the space to pause and say, I mean, it makes sense, but do I really want to believe what this person has to say? We are so quick to, and maybe this is something you can talk on how quick the brain processes and decides to make a decision in what's good or bad, because I know it's super quick, but I think that we hear someone and we're like, oh, I've been following them for a while. They seem trustworthy. Yes, what they said is absolutely true. And then we just take somebody else's belief and perspective, and then that becomes our truth. And then we miss out on being able to actually see the whole picture.
Well, that's a very good point. The world right now is a hot mess, and there are a lot of people with some serious agendas. But the thing to watch out for, one of the key factors is, are you trying to teach me or scare me?
Ooh.
So always ask that question, no matter who you're listening to. If the person is presenting you with established facts and said, well, this happened and then this was the result of it, and this is what we need to do to fix that, whatever it is, versus you're going to die, it's going to be horrible, they're going to take your food, you're never going to be happy again, but da 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 da. Whether that comes from a politician or a religion or somebody trying to sell you perfume, it doesn't matter what it is. There's a difference between wanting to give you information so that you can use agency and make decisions, in other words, relying on this, or you're mine. Once I get a hold of your amygdala, you belong to me. You are wrapped around my finger. I can tell you
Hmm.
anything and you won't question anymore. And that's how, to use the term, brainwashing works. No matter where you get washed, it's the same system. You're deprived of a feeling of safety and agency, and you hear things repeated to you over and over and over and over again. And pretty soon, your limbic system is running the show, and this part of you is kind of gone, and you lose your sense of self, literally. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have a self anymore. And the most important relationship, as you alluded to earlier, is your relationship with yourself. So one of the things you also have to pay attention to is how much time are you spending with yourself? We often get so busy and wrapped up in whatever that we're not spending any time with ourselves anymore. Actually, we're kind of afraid to. I don't know what's in there. I don't know what she looks like these days. It's like, if you think you put on a few pounds and you're going to try your pants on, but you're kind of scared to because they might not fit, and then you might have to deal with that. It's the same thing, only the emotional level. I'm not sure who I'll find when I go there. So
Mm.
taking time for quiet, taking time for meditation, taking time just to walk. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but anytime you can be alone without a screen, without a voice telling you something, just being with yourself, you'll find out who you are, and that gives you the information you need to say, yeah, I like what I found, or this needs a little tinkering. And then you can either do your tinkering, or if you're stuck, you can get a helper to assist you because we all get stuck sometimes. None of us, we're all perfectly imperfect, right? So we all have foibles and things that bother us. So the bravest thing, the most courageous thing anyone can do is ask for help.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And I think that is not something that our society talks about enough. We are taught to be so hyper independent, to only depend on ourselves.
Blah, blah, blah.
You keep hearing like, yeah, like, oh, this person's after you, so you got to look after you. And it's like we have taken away community, which is where we thrive to begin with. And we've taken away this support system and we've created this space where everybody is supposed to be divided and supposed to hate each other. And it's really hard to be able to focus on you if you are busy judging others because you're going to end up judging yourself for the same thing. You may not say it out loud, but I guarantee you that if you are judging someone else, that when you are home alone, you are thinking some of the similar things. You just may not say it in the same way, so you're not making the connection. But I do think that we have to be aware of what we are intaking and what we are putting out all of the time. And I do think it's super important to disconnect. 1000%. I am the first person that once I've had a week full of interactions, which I love people, I will be like, hey, babe, we need to go get coffee and I want to go walk in the woods and I don't want to be around anybody. And it's not because I want to be a hermit, it's because I need to disconnect. I need to be back with myself.
You need
And
to
I
reset.
love that, yeah. And I love that you said, we're afraid to be with ourselves. Oh
Hmm.
boy. I am going to raise my hand on that one and say 1000% correct because I was that person. I used to be the busybody, the one that when I
Yeah.
sat down was like, oh, I need to be doing something else. I could probably clean this. This probably needs to be done. Like I was always finding things to do,
Hmm.
even if there wasn't anything to do, simply because my brain just started going when I sat down. So I would have to watch a movie and be so enthralled in the movie. I felt like I was one of the characters just to
Hmm.
keep my brain from coming up. And,
Yeah.
when I first started doing a lot of work on myself, that was one of the first things my mentor told me. She was like, you need to sit with yourself. And I was like, ugh, who wants to do that? That's horrible. And so that's where I had to start. And, it started with just like 5 minutes here and there. And then it was, okay, well, maybe I write down all the thoughts that are coming through my head and just see where that kind of takes me. And it was really interesting, and a little sad to realize where my brain was really at and how it was seeing the world. And I kind of want to take this back. You were talking about in the beginning that, we have this little child that's
Yes.
inside of us. And I would love for you to elaborate for people and explain this because the way that I see it is, and the way I've had kind of had it explained is when we go through situations as a child, certain things attach themselves to us. So if we
Hmm.
were in a space where, like you said earlier, we didn't feel love, we kind of hold on to that. And so you
Hmm.
may be the most mature person when it comes to making business decisions, but then when it comes to like love and things like that, you find yourself almost throwing a tantrum. And
Hmm.
I interpret that as we have emotions throughout our body, but some of those emotions get stuck. And so instead of us being able to handle it as the adult that we should, we are handling it because of the space that we found ourselves in. And it's been really interesting to see that. And I think that that is where I was able to attach the term inner child, where
Hmm.
before that didn't make sense to me.
Hmm.
So anyway, I'd love for you to elaborate. What are your thoughts on inner child, or how we are growing and where we're mature in some areas, but like absolutely immature in others?
Well, that's another good point. We learn our intimacy skills for good or for ill from our family of origin.
Mm.
We learn our business skills in college or on the job or, whatever. So people often say, well, how come I'm so good at this, but I'm so terrible at that? Well, because that is what you learn from your family. And what they had to teach you was not terrific stuff. So big, a nice little phrase to have that I teach people is pain point. Write down what your pain points are. What are the things that'll get you? Certain comments, or maybe tone of voice, or maybe attitude of the other person. What are those pain points? And then um, you need to sit down with a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and on one side of the paper, write from your adult self. Ask questions. How are you? How are you feeling? What do you need? Um, how did George make you feel? What was that like? And if you really want to get into it, put your writing instrument then in your non-dominant hand and write on the other side of the page what your answer to that question is. Now, the reason that's so
Ooh.
especially cool is because, as you probably know, the brain is cross-wired. So when you write with that other hand, you're literally communicating with the other half of your brain. Straight up, straight on. I
Oh,
know.
I am trying this. This is so cool.
It's so cool. Now, you have to be prepared though, because if you've been kind of ignoring your little kid, she may have some words about that. Like you might say, well, hi, sweetie, how are you? Who are you? I don't like you. You smell. You're old. You just all kinds of things. Sometimes even bad language can get into the picture. Because like any kid who's been hurt, if you're not listening, she or he is not going to trust you. So it takes a while to develop, like any relationship, it takes a while to do that. A nice little ad adjunct to that is to get a favorite picture of yourself when you were little and put it on your phone or put it in a cool frame or something where you sit a lot. And several times a day, just check in with him or her. How you doing? What do you need? And it may be, I don't care if it's as simple as, do you want mustard or ketchup on your hot dog? Ask the question. Don't make the assumption and let her tell you. And initially, you may find, depending on how unhealthy your family was, that her responses will embarrass you. I want
Mm.
ketchup. I mean, I want a lot of ketchup on my hot dog. Slather it on there. I really want ketchup. And you'll think, oh God, what people are going to think of me putting all this ketchup on my hot dog? What you do, what you would do for any child in the world, if they really wanted ketchup on their hot dog, you would make sure they got that and protect them from anyone who tried to stop them. And so our job becomes now protecting that little person inside of us. And the best way to do this is said first listen. And then if you have to confront someone or something, give him or her a balloon, some crayons, popsicle, whatever, put them over in a safe place in your head, and you, the adult, go address the situation.
Mm.
And your Mississippi's I talked about earlier can help with that. Because once someone gives you a pain point, that kid comes out. And you will probably say things that you won't like, and or you'll shut down and let people hurt you again. So your Mississippi's, again, allowing to interfere with that limbic hijack process slows you down so your adult can take over and say, hey, don't talk to my kid like that. Nobody talks to my kid like that. I'm not putting up with it. I won't do it.
Mm.
Nobody bullies me. And part of what's going on in the world right now that's so painful is people are taking a knee to a bully. And there are a lot of bullies out there, by the way. And here's the thing, you can never, ever appease a bully because they're so insecure and they're so frightened that they're addicted to that sense of pain they see on your face, that sense of terror they see on your face. So I'm going to keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you and pushing you until you either collapse or agree with me and apply what I'm saying. So that brings us back to being self-aware. Who am I? Um, the message on my phone, the voicemail message is, hello, I have some questions. Who are you? What do you want? And how and when can you be reached? If you can answer these seemingly simple questions, be joyful. Most of us spend our whole lives working on them. So those are three important questions to ask yourself. Who am I? What do I want? And how can I get my needs met? How can
Mm.
people reach me in a constructive and loving way? And how can I reach back from that same position?
Oh, I love those questions. And I think it's important. You talked about trust as
Mm,
well. And I think that's something else that we don't realize that we don't have a lot of, which is the trust within ourselves. Like you said
yes.
earlier, we're really great at giving advice to everybody else, but we don't trust that
Yes.
advice for ourselves,
Yes.
right? We're really
Yes.
good at listening to what everyone else has to say and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, no, that sounds amazing. But when we have that small little gut punch, that little thing that's like, eh, we aren't trusting it. So how important is it to make sure that trusting yourself is what you begin with or what you get back to?
Well, it's imperative. And that's why it's really important to get things out of your head and onto paper.
Mm,
Now, one of the reasons why paper, everyone goes, paper, why can't I put it in my phone? Okay, well, you can, but it won't be as effective. This act of moving your hand to write makes the brain release something called GABA. And it's a hormone that is very soothing, which is why coloring is so soothing. Knitting, crocheting, anything with your fingers, any action like
okay.
that. So, writing down what you're frightened about, writing down what's worrying you, writing down what you're angry about. It gives you, again, you get your nice GABA, which is good. And then you're able to pull back and look at that. And you can ask yourself those questions. Well, what proof do I have that's true? So and so says, I'm a pain in the butt. What proof is there that that's true? And if you decide, yeah, there's not a lot of proof to support that, then you think about, okay, so how am I going to stay myself in the face of another? And harkening back to our early discussion about families, that's one of the things you get brainwashed into believing is you don't have a self. You don't have a right to that. So you become whoever you're with.
Mm,
And if someone's really being a jerk, you can find yourself pulled into gossip and negative behavior, even though it's ego dystonic, which means it goes against your character. It may be ego dystonic, but you'll find yourself strangely pulled along by this force of, negativity or bad speech or whatever, is going on. So that remembering to ground yourself. Now, there are a few techniques for that are very helpful. One of them is if you find yourself in a situation where you're just flooded, there's just stuff, right, coming at you. Do a check-in. Um, Pick up something. It can be anything, a rock, anything that's handy. Just feel it. Feel the rock. Feel your feet in your shoes or feel your feet on the ground. What are you smelling? What can you hear? What can you see right now? And it'll bring you back into your body and you can remember. I was working with a patient one time and she had a PTSD episode and she was curling up into the fetal position. It was really bad situation. And I said to her, "What color are my shoes?" And what? They're black. Good, you're back. Welcome back. And she said, "Oh my gosh." She said it was amazing. I could feel myself going away. And when you said, "What color are my shoes?" I was immediately back in the room. So little things like that, small, tiny things that you can use anywhere. No special equipment needed, right? Another one that's really helpful is water. If you're really overwhelmed, you're in a pain point and you feel a little bit stuck there, go to a bathroom anywhere, splash water, cold water on your face. Or failing that, go outside in the cold. Open your freezer door and stick your head in there. Whatever you can find, but it will help reset, like we were talking about a minute ago,
Yeah.
and get you back out of this limbic nightmare and more into, okay, what's really happening? Who am I? What do I want? And how and when can I be reached? And then you're good. You're back on your feet, ready to go.
Oh, I love that there's so many simple techniques that we could be using. I don't think that that's talked about enough. There's always something for you to purchase or something for you to do or some person for you to work with, to talk with. Not that that's bad. I've had a mentor for 5.5 years. But I love the simplicity of being able to do something for yourself. As someone that had PTSD, I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to feeling like you're being completely pulled out. It's like you see it in the movies where all of a sudden everything starts to kind of melt and you start
Yes.
seeing a completely different scene. I have
Yes.
seen that. I have been in that space where it feels like everything around me literally just melted and I can only see whatever scenario that I've been brought back into. And I wish I would have known at that point in time these simple tools, of being able to do things like that. I've heard of the cold water on the face or in your hands, holding an ice cube, something like that. And it really is interesting how it snaps the body out of whatever it's doing. What I really think is interesting is how important our senses are for keeping us in the present. Do you have any reason to why that is? Because I feel like I use that a lot. I'm a huge smell person. So
Me
before I
too.
go into meetings, I have a candle that I light or a sage stick. Like I use that to shift my moods a lot. But it's really interesting. Like of all the people that I've talked with on the podcast, a lot of people go back to using some form of your senses.
Hmm.
Why is that?
Well, because your senses are what allow you to be present in the moment, not in the past, not worried about what happened, not worrying about what might happen, but just being here. And being here and living minute by minute is the greatest power there is. No one can control you, no one can manipulate you. And you can make whatever decisions you need to make to create the world you want to create. I hope if you don't remember anything else we talk about, please remember this. Be wary of consensual reality.
Mm.
Be very wary of that. There are people who will say, oh, well, this is the way the world is, and there aren't any exceptions. One of my favorites is, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Well, why would you have
Oh,
cake then? What's the point of that? That doesn't make any sense. Or I'm a frosting girl myself, but still, you got to have something to hold the frosting up, right? Or here's a good one. Well, money doesn't grow on trees. Well, it does for people who have
yes.
orchards. That's exactly where they get their money from.
Oh, I love that. I am so using that. I've never heard that before.
So, so people will, and again, it's that hypnotic thing. They say it over and over and over again. You begin to
Yep.
think, oh, well, that's what's true. My mother used to say to me, Margaret, all you do is talk, talk, talk. How are you ever going to make a living just talking? And guess what? That's what I do. I make a living talking. I talk to people all over the world and it's wonderful. But in her reality, that was impossible. She
Mm.
couldn't see it. And she was trying to give me that reality here. This is what's true. And so here's a little phrase to use when someone starts to tell you what's true. You say, well, that's your story about me, but it's not my story about me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think what's really interesting is this concept that I've been brought into over the last several years, which is we actually get to create our reality,
Yeah, absolutely.
and from being in a space that I was in before where all I saw was the negative things and what had happened to me and what I had been through and what it was causing now because of that. I felt like the world was just dumping on top of me.
Mm,
And, and I know that a lot of people feel this way. So I'd love your tips on that as well. But I know that when I kind of started shifting into this reality that I'm in now, it really has to do with the perspective and what you choose to believe. And I find that that's really interesting because, when we're younger, we're taught there's right and there's wrong, and there's a truth and there's a lie. But everybody is telling their own perspectives from things. So, how do you understand what is truth and what is not? And it's been really interesting to learn that I can create that truth and that belief in myself. And then that's what I can move forward with. And that's okay.
Well, let me tell you a real quick story. A woman I worked with many, many years ago, when I was working in a clinic, she came in and she was Hispanic and she had two boys and she worked at McDonald's. And she was depressed and anxious and miserable and she just wanted to die. God bless her. She was in a terrible state. And I said, well, what's bothering you the most? And she said, well, my husband left us and went back to Mexico, and I have
Mm.
no child support, and I'm trying to live on, hamburger and French fry money. And we live in this little shoebox place, and I'm just miserable. And I said, oh, well, where would you like to live? And she just looked at me with hate in her eyes, like, why would you ask me that? I don't have any choice. I have to do this. I said, I know, I know. I understand I'm crazy and annoying, but just give it a shot. Where would you like to live? And she said, well, I don't know. I guess I'd like to have a house so the boys could have their own bedroom and maybe a little backyard so we could have a dog and that kind of stuff. I said, oh, well, if you're gonna find that, what would you do? Then she looked at me with that hate look again, like, why are you asking me this? I said, I know, I'm crazy and annoying, but just give it a shot. So she said, well, I guess I'd look around for someplace else to rent, but I can't afford anything else. Now we're into plenty and paucity, aren't we? She was convinced I can't have enough. I don't have enough and I can't have enough. So I said,
Mm.
well, what do you got to lose? Oh, she was madder than a wet hen. She stomped out of that room. But 2 weeks later, she stomped back in. And she said, well, I found a place. I said, oh, you did? But I can't afford it. I said, oh, well, why is that? She said, well, because it's double the rent I'm paying now. I said, oh, well, okay. We know, of course, you can't afford it. But if you could afford it, how do you think that might happen? She gave me that look again, but not for as long this time. And she said, well, I guess I could ask the landlord if maybe I could do work in lieu of the rest of the rent because the house was a little run down. She said, my brothers are in construction. Maybe we could work out something. I said, well, that's a thought. Probably won't work though. So she left, she came back again and she said, well, I got the house. And my brothers are going to fix it. He's supplying all the materials and stuff. My brothers are going to fix it up. And now my boys have a yard and a room and stuff and everything. She was so happy. And then a little bit later, she came back and she told me how much she hated me because now that they'd fixed up the house, the landlord wanted to sell it. And she said, I can't afford to buy the house. I said, I know you can't afford to buy the house. You can't afford to live in the house. You can't afford to be happy. You can't do anything. But if you were going to buy the house, how would you do it? And she said, well, I guess I'd ask the landlord if maybe he could hold the paper instead of a bank because I won't qualify to bank, and maybe he'd let me buy the house like that. I said, well, I'm sure it won't work, but you can give it a try. So she goes out, she comes back, and she says, he said yes, he's going to let me buy the house, and I get to pay the rent that I'm paying in my little box right now. And I said, wow, that's really wonderful. I said, so other horrible things aren't going to happen in your life. And she said, well, she said, I don't know what to do. I need more money to live. And I said, okay, so I'm going to ask you the question. You know that, right? And she said, I know. And I said, the question is, what would you do if you were doing the job you loved? And she was quiet for a minute and she said, well, I'd really like to be a couturier. I'd like to design and make really beautiful. And she was an incredible seamstress, just amazing. I said, well, if you were going to do that, how would you go about it? Because of course we know it won't work, but how would you go about it? And she said, well, I guess I'd go to some of the bridal shops and do a little free work and show them what I can do. Well, let me just say, long story short, she doesn't work at McDonald's anymore. And she now designs and sews costumes for the San Francisco Opera
Oh my gosh.
here in California, the San Jose, California Opera, and she does a lot of very private high-end sewing. And she makes probably 10 times what she made at McDonald's. And she has her house and she has her boys, and we all live happily ever after. But the consensual reality told her, no, you're stuck. You can't
Yep.
ever get out of it. Don't take any risks. Don't ask any questions. Don't do anything. So that's why I say be careful of consensual reality. And you can have your cake and eat it too. And money can grow on trees depending on your profession. And you can do whatever it is that you really have heart to do. But what you got to remember is sometimes you'll start down a path and say, I want this. And then you'll veer off and you'll think, oh, I've failed. No, actually, you've opened another door. Because there may, in fact, be a different direction you need to go first, or you may change your mind and say, oh, no, this is really the direction I want.
Yeah. And I think that this is like in the way that you were describing this and having this conversation, what I think is really, really beautiful, and I've talked about this several times on the podcast, is you had her use her imagination. You
Hmm.
had her think outside of the box. And just like you were saying, we get stuck in this construct that we're supposed to believe things are this way because this
Yes.
is the way that we can see it,
Yes.
but you leave so many things on the table on the other side that you're
Yes.
not able to think about because you're not using that imagination anymore. I think that's one of the coolest things that my mentor taught me a couple years ago when I started getting into speaking and doing some stuff. I was like, I don't know if people are going to listen to me. And she was like, okay, but what if they did? And so that's what we did. We role played this all the time about dreaming out what it would look like,
Yeah.
right? And so every time that I do something, I'm like, I just put an application in for a speaking company, and she's like, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I open my email up every day, and I'm like, oh, it's here, and I'm like, oh, but it's not. I'm like, but I can't wait for it. So I'm able to attach the emotion and the feeling to that imagination, which actually makes it feel so much more real. And it's really interesting how that in itself, which isn't something we are right, physically touching and doing, but just the imagination itself unlocks the potential to go in a different direction.
Yes. And the brilliant part about that is consensual reality will tell you don't use your imagination because you'll get hurt and disappointed.
Yep.
So if you flip the script and you say, "Oh, this email is coming," okay, and let's say it doesn't turn out the way you're imagining it right now, the next thing you say to yourself is something good will come of it. And that's what's tricky, and that's what consensual reality tells us not to think about is don't hold open for possibilities. Everything's an end. And so rather than, okay, well, this closed up, but this thing over here can open. And that's what keeps you excited about life because, wow, something better's coming. I wonder what it'll be.
Yep. This or
That,
something better. That
yeah,
is the phrase that I use all the time. And it has drastically changed the way that I see my life and see my future. And you're right, it brings a lot of hope, it brings joy, it brings all these feelings that we hope that one day we'll feel, but you're able to create it in that space. And it makes everything else in life a little bit easier, I feel
not to
like.
mention your health. Because when you're
Yeah.
thinking in that positive, creative way, it powers up your immune system. It lowers your heart rate and your blood pressure. Your lymphatic system works better. Your digestion improves, your sleep, because the body and the mind are one thing. We often artificially separate it, but they're
Hmm.
actually one thing. And you can't impact one without powerfully impacting the other. So that's why when you are taking care of yourself, it's important to take care of the body and also take care of the mind, which is why all that somatic or body stuff you were talking about is so very, very important and why it often brings us back. Using our body will bring us back. Because the thing we don't think about with our little 10,000-year-old equipment here, it's never seen anything. Your brain's never seen anything. It's never
Hmm.
experienced anything. The only way it can is with these appendages, this outside stuff that we have. And that's what gives it feedback. But if we are giving it negative feedback or no feedback, we're not using our tools, then it's kind of in a bad place and starts producing a lot of bad chemicals. And that's the tricky part is chemicals create thoughts and feelings create chemicals.
Mm.
So I always prescribe vitamin G, which is gratitude. Very, very important to take your vitamin G every day. So easy to do. You can write it out. Remember our GABA, Or you can just say it to yourself. I'm so happy and grateful that I have purple dinosaur socks. I'm so happy and grateful that I have four wonderful dogs. Sometimes in the beginning, it's hard to latch on to what you're grateful for, but as you
Hmm.
practice, the list gets longer and longer. And literally, we've got a lot of data that shows in about 28 to 30 days, we're going to rewire your brain. You keep taking your vitamin G, and you'll begin to notice that things that used to really bother you, not such a big deal anymore. And your amygdala can't hijack you so easily anymore. And you become in charge of you.
Oh, I love this. And I used to do this all the time. I did this for the longest time where every morning that I woke up, I said to myself at least 3 to 5 things that I was grateful for. And I picked the tiniest things that I could think of, fresh water, my kids are still here, whatever the case was. And I really can attest to that, that it really did help change the outlook of everything.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Dr. Margaret, I could talk to you for hours and I could go down so many rabbit holes. I think that what you were doing is absolutely wonderful. I can't thank you enough for sharing all of your knowledge and insight. I think that it's so important for us to come back to ourselves, to understand who we are and start trusting in ourselves. Where can everybody find you and connect with you?
Ah, well, I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. My website is drcochran.com. And I have a podcast myself, The Relationship Doctor.
Oh,
And let me say to you as we end, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and I'm so grateful for the things that you are doing for people. It matters, it makes a difference. So thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
I appreciate that. Of course, we'll make sure we have all the information in the show notes. Dr. Margaret, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
No matter what, don't give up.
Mm, so true. So true. Oh, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. I can't thank you enough for sharing.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. To everybody else out there, I hope you're starting to see a pattern. I hope you're starting to realize that we ourselves is what matters the most. And the more that we focus on that, the more that we are able to give to others, whether that is supportiveness, open-endedness, curiosity, a space to be understood. This is the space that we need to come back to, and we need to start getting away from all those outside forces that are trying to make and create the decisions in the lives for us, because we truly do have a choice. Go find Dr. Margaret, follow her, jump on her website. I know she's got some amazing stuff. And I can't thank you all enough for just being a part of the podcast and listening to it. And I'm so grateful to be able to have this space to be able to share with amazing people, just like Dr. Margaret. So until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable